All right, today we're tackling a big one. We're diving into a set of ideas that totally change the way we think about power, culture, and society. It's called critical theory, and it's not just about observing the world. It's about asking why it works the way it does, and this is the important part, how we can make it better.
So to really get critical theory, you have to travel back with me to the 1930s, to a really terrifying puzzle. See, according to the big theories of the day, industrialized countries like Germany were supposed to be on the brink of a workers' revolution. But what happened instead? The total opposite. They got fascism. It was a complete catastrophe, and this mystery is exactly what a new group of thinkers set out to solve.
So yeah, to understand their answer, we first have to really sit with the question they were facing, this massive crisis that kicked off this whole school of thought.
Right. So over at the Institute for Social Research in Frankfurt, you had this brilliant group of intellectuals, people like Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, and Herbert Marcuse. And they looked around and realized that the old theories, the old tools, just weren't working anymore. They were like intellectual detectives trying to solve the case of a world that had gone completely off the rails. And history would remember them as the Frankfurt School. They knew that a totally new kind of problem needed a totally new kind of theory, one that wasn't content to just sit on the sidelines and observe, but was willing to get its hands dirty. And this, right here, is the crucial difference. You see, traditional theory tries to be like a science, just objectively describing the facts of society. But the Frankfurt School said, whoa, hold on, doing that just ends up supporting the way things already are. Their new approach, what they called critical theory, had a very different mission. Its goal was to critique society to help free people from all forms of domination. The point wasn't just to understand the world, it was to change it.
And to do this, they put together this incredible intellectual toolkit. They weren't afraid to mix and match. So from Karl Marx, they took the powerful critique of capitalism. From Sigmund Freud, they grabbed psychoanalysis to understand our minds, why we sometimes go along with things that are clearly not good for us. And from Max Weber, they took this idea of modern life as an iron cage of rules, bureaucracy, and cold efficiency.
Okay, so armed with these powerful tools, they began to diagnose modern society. And their diagnosis, well, it was deeply unsettling. They basically argued that modernity itself was sick.
This quote, wow, from their masterpiece Dialectic of Enlightenment, it just perfectly captures their big idea. Remember the Enlightenment? It was supposed to be this great project to free humanity from myth and superstition using the power of reason. But Horkheimer and Adorno argued that this very same reason had a dark side. It had morphed into a tool for control. They gave this dark side a name, instrumental reason. It's a way of thinking that looks at the world, at nature, at other people, even at ourselves, and only sees a resource, something to be managed, optimized, and controlled for maximum efficiency. It's reason with the soul stripped out, a logic that flattens everything and removes its intrinsic value.
And they saw this logic absolutely everywhere. I mean, have you ever felt like the entertainment you consume is kind of designed to keep you from thinking too much? That's what they were talking about with the culture industry. It's not real, organic culture that grows from the people. It's mass-produced, standardized entertainment churned out for the people, designed to keep us passive, distracted, and basically okay with the way things are.
And you can see these bleak ideas developing over some of the darkest years of the 20th century. In 1937, they laid out their whole mission. 10 years later, in 1947, came that huge critique of reason. Then, in 1950, they went deep into the psychology behind it all, and by 1964, Herbert Marcuse brought the diagnosis up to date with his massively influential book, One-Dimensional Man.
Which brings us right back to that original puzzle. See, it wasn't enough to just critique society from a distance. They had to get inside people's heads. They had to ask, what kind of person is drawn to authoritarianism? What makes someone want to follow a strongman leader?
Their famous study, The Authoritarian Personality, laid out a pretty chilling psychological chain of events. They argued that as the old authority of the family got weaker, people were instead being shaped directly by mass culture. This left individuals feeling really isolated, anxious, and powerless. And in that state of fear, submitting to a powerful authoritarian leader actually felt like a relief. It eases the anxiety.
So, yeah, the diagnosis was grim. The first generation of the Frankfurt School painted a pretty dark picture of a totally administered world. But the story doesn't end there. The next generation came along and started searching for a cure. Which really leaves us with the big question, right? Are we just trapped in this thing? Is modern society this iron cage of control that Adorno and Horkheimer described, with no way out?
Well, the leading voice of the second generation, a thinker named Jürgen Habermas, said no. He believed there was hope,
And he found it in a really surprising place. Not in some grand, violent revolution, but in the most simple, basic, everyday thing we do as human beings, talking to each other.
Habermas called this communicative action, and it's the total opposite of instrumental reason. Where instrumental reason is all about command and control, communicative action is about reaching a mutual understanding. He made this amazing argument that baked right into the structure of our language is a potential for real reason and freedom. It's our capacity to convince each other with good arguments and freely agree on how we want to live.
Now, to explain this, he gave us this really useful two-part model of society. On one side, you've got the system. That's the economy, the government bureaucracy, all the stuff that runs on the cold, impersonal logic of money and power. But on the other side, you have the life world. And that's our everyday existence, our families, our friendships, our culture, the stuff that's supposed to run on genuine human understanding.
And this brings us to his key warning, what he called the colonization of the life world. This is what happens when the logic of the system, efficiency, profit, control, invades and starts to take over our personal lives. Think about it. When friendships are measured by their networking value, or family time gets scheduled like a business meeting for maximum productivity. That's the system colonizing the life world. And Habermas argued this is incredibly dangerous because it erodes the very human connections that hold our society together.
So why does any of this matter now? I mean, this is all fascinating history, but what does a bunch of theory from the 1930s to the 1980s have to do with us today? Well, as it turns out, a whole lot.
The legacy of the Frankfurt School is just immense. Its way of questioning power, ideology, and culture is basically the DNA for so many modern fields that are fighting for a better world, from feminist theory and critical race theory to post-colonial studies and beyond. It gives us the language and the tools to diagnose our own crises, whether we're talking about the economy, politics, or the environment.
And that really brings it all back to you, because critical theory isn't just some dusty academic topic. It's an invitation. It's a challenge, really, to look at your own world, your own life, and to start asking, what are the invisible systems? What are the unspoken rules and the messages from the culture industry that shape how I think and what I do? And once you start to see them, how can you begin to question them?
No te vayas del video antes de comentar, suscribirte o darle like. Recuerda que estamos en TikTok, Instagram y YouTube.